Tonight, members of the public will no longer be guaranteed an opportunity to speak during Texas Railroad Commission meetings. Instead, there will be listening sessions held throughout the year by agency staffers, not necessarily the elected commissioners who actually regulate the state's oil and gas industry. KLTV7's Michael Richardson spoke with an East Texas attorney who says as long as anyone can go to these public meetings, whether they're allowed to actually speak is what he calls fair game.
Tyler attorney Justin Roberts says Texas law does not require public comment periods during state agency meetings, whether it be the Railroad Commission or another government body.
So many of the agencies have their own internal rules and procedures about how the Open Meetings Act is applied to their agency. So it's not uncommon to not have a public comment period or a public participation segment.
Under new policy, public comment periods will no longer be guaranteed during meetings, replaced with listening sessions and events held by staff. In a statement, Commissioner Wayne Christian says in part the goal is to expand access, adding the prior policy favored availability for the few over accessibility for the many.
At the end of the day, this is about making the Railroad Commission more accessible and making sure more of the people we serve can participate.
Commissioner Christy Craddock was the sole dissenting vote.
I do believe some people want to talk to us as commissioners and as elected official. I think that's something ought to be open to.
The move came as a surprise for Roberts, who has represented gas companies before the Railroad Commission.
But I do expect that if the Railroad Commission does this, that other agencies will soon follow.
Michael Richardson, KLTV7 News.
And while no public comment period is required, the commissioners can request input on certain topics at their discretion.